Welcome to the deep dive. Our whole mission here is pretty simple. We take source material, could be articles, research, maybe even your own notes, and we pull out the most important stuff for you. Quickly, yeah, cutting through the noise so you can get informed fast.
Exactly.
And today, we're diving into something that, well, makes a lot of leaders pretty uncomfortable, making mistakes. We're using an article from Phoenix Performance Partners as our guide. It's called Leading Through Mistakes with Grace.
You know, it's funny, there's this default assumption, isn't there? This fear that if you're the leader and you admit you got something wrong.
You look weak.
Right. Weak, less competent, maybe you shouldn't even be in charge. It feels ingrained.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the assumption the Phoenix Performance Partners article really tackles head on. They call it a dangerous one, actually.
Dangerous because?
Because leaders operate thinking that admitting a mistake will automatically sink their authority, chip away at their credibility.
Okay, but this article says
Nah.
the opposite, completely flips it, yeah. It argues that owning your errors, saying I messed up, is actually one of the fastest ways to build trust.
Wow. Okay, that feels really counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Build trust by admitting failure.
It does feel that way at first, but think about it. We live in a world where people can spot fakeness pretty easily, right?
Yeah, authenticity matters.
Exactly. So the source points out, when a leader is brave enough to say, yep, that was my mistake, they don't look weak, they look human, real.
And being real, being authentic, that does what?
According to the article, it creates this really important thing called psychological safety.
Ah, okay. Heard that term.
And that safety is apparently the bedrock for real innovation and top-tier team performance. It's kind of a chain reaction.
All starting from just admitting you were wrong.
Seems so. But the article also gets into why it's so hard for leaders to do that. They mention something called the internal critic.
The little voice inside your head.
That's the one. That fear-driven voice whispering, don't you dare admit that. You'll look stupid. They'll lose respect for you.
We all have that voice sometime.
We do. And the source argues this critic isn't just bad for the leader's own stress levels. It actually poisons the whole company culture.
Poisons it how? What does that look like in a team?
Well, think about it. If the boss never admits they're wrong, who else is going to feel safe sticking their neck out?
Nobody, probably.
Right. So mistakes get buried, problems just fester under the surface because everyone's too scared to talk about them openly?
And trust just evaporates because people know things aren't being dealt with, honestly.
Exactly. There's this gap between the shiny everything's fine image and the messy truth everyone secretly knows. Energy goes into covering up, not fixing things.
Wow, okay.
And the article actually shares this cautionary tale, a story about a CEO that really hammers this home.
The CEO who prided himself on never being wrong.
That's the one. The source describes him as someone who really actively worked on this image of being infallible, which, as we just said, probably came from that internal critic working overtime.
Okay, so what happened with this infallible CEO?
Well, his company had this big product launch, and it was a total disaster. It just flopped completely.
Oh, dear. And his reaction, let me guess, not his fault.
Textbook deflection, according to the article, immediately starts pointing fingers everywhere else.
Wait.
Oh, the usual suspects. The economy wasn't right. Competitors were too aggressive. He even blamed the weather.
The weather. For a product launch failure, that takes some nerve.
Right. But here's the kicker. The real tragedy, the source points out, wasn't just the failure or even the flimsy excuses.
What was the deeper issue then?
The real problem was that everyone in the company knew exactly why the product failed.
Ah, it was something the CEO did.
It was a key decision he made, and he had specifically gone against the advice of his own team to make it.
Oh, wow. So while he's blaming clouds, everyone else is thinking, dude, we told you so.
Pretty much. And his refusal, his absolute inability to just own his part in it, that sent a terrible message. The article puts it starkly. It signaled that being right matters more than being effective.
Oof. That's toxic. Shifting the goal from success to just protecting the leader's ego.
Totally. And the Phoenix Performance Partners article has a great term for the cultures this creates. Perfection prisons.
Perfection prisons. Sounds grim.
It is. It's where people feel trapped, like they have to pretend everything's perfect all the time. They waste so much energy hiding mistakes instead of actually learning from them. All because the leader confused being never wrong with actually having authority.
And I think this is where the science backs this up, right? The article mentions Amy Edmondson from Harvard.
Yes, exactly. Her work on psychological safety is like foundational here. It provides the hard data behind this whole argument.
Like, what's the key finding they highlight?
Well, one of the really interesting findings cited in the article is that high-performing teams, they don't necessarily make fewer mistakes than other teams.
Wait, really? I would have thought high performers just get it right more often.
That's the common assumption, isn't it? But the research shows the big difference isn't how often they mess up, it's how often they talk about messing up. High-performing teams actually report more mistakes.
Okay, hold on. Reporting more mistakes makes you perform better. How does that work?
Because, they feel safe enough to actually admit them, to look at them, figure out what went wrong, and learn. They don't shove them under the rug because they're scared. That
Ooh.
willingness to engage with the error, to bring it out into the open, that's the game changer.
So when a leader models that, when they say, oops, my bad, here's what happened, they're basically giving everyone else permission.
Exactly. Permission to be human, permission to say, hey, I need help, or I think this went wrong, without fearing they'll be shamed or punished.
And that creates the psychological safety.
Precisely. And the article pulls out some pretty stark numbers from Edmondson's research to show the impact.
Okay, lay them on me.
Teams with highest psychological safety, they are 27% more likely to actually report their mistakes.
27%. So much more transparency right off the bat.
Yep. And they're 47% more likely to say they can openly discuss tough problems or failures.
Almost half, again, is likely to have those difficult but crucial conversations.
And here's the payoff for performance. They're 67% more likely to actually apply what they learned from those mistakes to get better next time.
Wow, 67%. That's huge. More than 2/3 more likely to turn an error into real improvement.
It really drives it home, doesn't it? The cost of those perfection prisons versus the benefit of safety. It shows hiding mistakes isn't just about honesty. It directly hurts performance. It stops learning dead in its tracks.
Okay, so the Phoenix Performance Partners article then frames this as a kind of mindset shift for leaders, right?
Yeah.
From fear to something else.
Yes, they call it moving from fear-based leadership to love-based leadership, which might sound a bit, fluffy.
A little bit, maybe.
But it really clarifies the motivation behind the behavior. Fear-based is driven by that internal critic again.
The voice saying, don't screw up, don't look bad.
Exactly. If I admit this, they'll lose confidence. I need to look like I have all the answers. Showing vulnerability is weak. The goal is always to appear infallible.
It's all about protecting yourself, your image.
Right. Primarily self-protection.
So what does the love-based side look like, according to the article?
It's a deliberate switch. The thinking becomes, actually, being authentic is how I build trust. Or, my job isn't to have all the answers, it's to create a space where we can find them together.
Okay, so vulnerability isn't weakness anymore. It's courage, humanity.
Exactly. And authority doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from empowering your people, helping them grow.
It's a shift from, unconsciously protecting yourself to consciously trying to serve the team.
That's a great way to put it. And the article argues this isn't just a tweak. This shift can fundamentally change the whole organization's culture. Because leaders set the tone, right?
Their mindset kind of becomes the operating system for everyone else.
It really does. Now, another crucial thing the article points out is that just mumbling, my bad, isn't quite enough. They talk about different levels of acknowledging mistakes.
So not all apologies are created equal.
Not at all. They outline 4 levels, kind of weakest to strongest.
Okay, give us level 1, the weakest one.
Level 1 is the deflection. This is barely an acknowledgement at all. It's vague, avoids taking any real responsibility.
Like that classic politician line, mistakes were made.
Exactly. The article uses mistakes were made, but, as a prime example, it hints something went wrong, but immediately pivots to blame something or someone else, or downplays it. The source says this often does more harm than good because it feels so insincere.
Right, damages trust even more. Okay, level 2.
Level 2 is the technical admission. This is where the leader does take responsibility for a specific thing they did wrong, but it's very factual, detached.
So I made an error calculating that figure.
Yep.
Uses I, names the error. But that's it. The article says it's better because you own the action, but there's no sense of the impact it had on others. It's functional,
Yep.
but not very human.
Got it. So level 3 must bring in that human element.
Exactly. Level 3 is the personal ownership. This is where you own the action and show you understand how it affected other people.
Okay, so adding on. I made an error calculating that figure, and I realized that created a lot of extra work and stress for the team.
That's level 3. Owning it, acknowledging the fallout, showing you actually considered how others felt. Much more connecting. Builds trust.
And the top tier, level 4, the growth opportunity.
This is the gold standard.
Yeah.
It includes everything from level 3, the ownership, the impact awareness, but then it adds sharing what you learned, committing to doing things differently, and this is key, inviting other people into the solution. Ah, okay. So building on the example again. I messed up that calculation, and I know it caused stress. I've learned I really need to double-check assumptions first. Going forward, I'm going to add a review step, but I'd also love to hear your thoughts. What could we do as a team to prevent this kind of thing?
Perfect. That's level 4. It turns your individual mistake into a chance for the whole team to learn and get better together. The article really highlights this as the most powerful level for turning errors into genuine progress.
That 4-level breakdown is super useful. It gives you a way to think about the quality of the acknowledgement. And you mentioned the article has a framework to help leaders actually do this well. Grace.
Yes, the GRACE framework. It's a really practical, step-by-step guide for handling mistakes constructively, aiming for that level 4 acknowledgement.
Okay, let's walk through Grace. Great.
G is for get clear on what actually happened. Simple first step, but crucial. Before you say anything, take a moment to really understand the mistake yourself. What exactly happened? What was your specific role? The article really emphasizes being honest with yourself here, avoiding the temptation to minimize or make excuses in your own head first.
So pause and reflect honestly. Got it.
R. R is recognize the impact on others. This connects back to getting to level 3, right? Think about everyone who is affected, your team, sure, but maybe also customers, other departments, stakeholders. Consider the practical stuff, delays, costs, but also the emotional sides, stress, frustration, maybe lost confidence.
Okay, seeing the full ripple effect. A.
A is accept full responsibility. This is about owning your part, clearly. Directly. Use I statements. The article is pretty blunt here. No ifs, ands, or buts. No blaming. Just own your contribution to the mistake.
Straightforward ownership.
Yeah.
C.
C stands for commit to learning and change. This is where you show it wasn't just an empty apology. You need to articulate what you actually learned from this mistake. And then, crucially, what specific actions you'll take differently in the future because of that learning. Make it concrete, not just vague promises.
Making the lesson to future behavior.
Mm.
Okay. And the final letter, E.
E is engage others in solutions. This brings in that collaborative piece from level 4. Don't just dictate the solution. Ask your team. Ask stakeholders for their input. What ideas do you have? How can we build a better process? It empowers people and turns your mistake into a collective learning moment.
Grace. Get clear, recognize impact, accept responsibility, commit to change, engage others. That's a really solid structure for turning a negative into a positive.
It really is. It guides you past just saying sorry into actually leading through the mistake.
And the article gives some practical ways leaders can start using this, right? Like where to apply it day to day.
Yeah, they suggest integrating it into your regular work patterns, like team meetings, for instance.
How would that work? Just bring up a mistake.
The source suggests maybe starting a meeting by sharing a recent mistake you made, could be small, and what you learned. It immediately sets the tone. Shows vulnerability is okay, learning is expected.
That feels like a relatively safe way to start building that culture. What about in like one-on-one chats?
Yeah, if someone on your team tells you about a mistake they made, the article suggests sharing a similar one you've made in the past, or even recently, instead of just jumping to correction.
Creates connection instead of just judgment.
Exactly. Shows empathy, reduces their shame, reinforces that mistakes are normal, learning is the goal, makes the relationship more human.
Makes sense. Any other examples?
They also mention public communications if something goes wrong externally, like with customers. Lead with acknowledgement. Own it quickly. The article argues people trust honesty and a clear plan to fix things way more than defensive spin.
Yeah, trying to cover things up externally almost always backfires.
Right. And finally, even in performance reviews, talk about your own mistakes and learnings from the period alongside discussing the team member's performance. It frames development as a continuous journey for everyone, including the leader.
These all seem like concrete ways to make acknowledging mistakes just normal. Part of how things are done.
And the article argues that when you do this consistently, it creates these powerful ripple effects.
Like what?
Well, innovation goes up because people aren't afraid to try things that might not work perfectly the first time. They know failure is treated as a learning opportunity, not a punishable offense.
Right, the energy shifts from avoiding blame to taking smart risks.
Exactly. Communication gets better too because problems get surfaced earlier when people feel safe saying, I think there's an issue here, you can fix things faster.
Trust obviously gets deeper. Authenticity is a huge trust builder.
Definitely. And ultimately, performance improves because all that energy that used to go into hiding errors or navigating fear is now focused on solving problems and getting better collectively.
It really sounds like the path from one of those perfection prisons to becoming a genuine learning organization.
That's exactly the transformation the source describes. And they make the point that this kind of culture built on trust, learning, authentic leadership is really hard for competitors to copy. It becomes a real strategic advantage.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive, drawing heavily on that Phoenix Performance Partners article, it really challenges that old idea that leaders need to be bulletproof, right?
Absolutely. It makes a really strong case that genuine strength, real leadership authority, comes from having the courage to be human, to own your mistakes, and crucially, to learn out loud with your team.
The big takeaway seems to be acknowledging mistakes isn't a sign of weakness at all. It's actually a powerful source of strength. It builds trust, credibility, and paves the way for better performance and a much healthier culture.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So, drawing directly from the article's challenge, here's something for you to think about. What's one mistake, maybe big, maybe small, that you've made recently that maybe you haven't fully acknowledged yet,
Yeah.
even just to yourself?
And then maybe think about applying that GRACE framework. Could you get clear on what happened, recognize the impact, accept responsibility, commit to learning, maybe even engage others?
The article really frames it as this constant choice point for leaders when things go wrong. Are you going to protect your ego or serve your team's purpose? Model perfection or model growth? Create fear or foster trust?
And remember that closing thought from the source. Your team doesn't actually need a perfect leader. They need a courageous one, someone who sees mistakes not as the end of the road, but as a chance for everyone to learn and improve together.
So the question to leave you with is, what mistake will you have the courage to acknowledge this week?